I know that the ones who love us will miss us. Those were the quiet, haunting words of Keanu Reeves, a man who has lived through pain, loss, and heartbreak, yet somehow keeps moving forward. At 60 years old, Keanu has become more than an actor. He's become a symbol of resilience, humility, and grace in a world that rarely forgives weakness. During the filming of John Wick, he shattered his kneecap. Most actors would have taken months off to recover, but Keanu returned to set just 3 days later. The pain was excruciating, yet he pushed through every scene. His dedication was not about ego or fame. It was about commitment, the kind of quiet determination that defines him. Over the years, he's been robbed, impersonated by AI scammers, and even spent $50,000 a month trying to protect his fans from fake profiles using his face. Through it all, he never lashed out or complained. He simply kept working. In 2025, Keanu did something few expected. He stepped onto Broadway, performing 8 shows a week despite constant pain from past injuries and surgeries. Critics called him brilliant, saying his performance carried a raw vulnerability that couldn't be taught. But behind the curtain, he was battling something deeper: decades of hidden pain, surgeries, and heartbreak that had never truly healed. When he finally opened up, he made it clear this wasn't a retirement or a farewell. It was something else entirely, something Hollywood wasn't ready for. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon. His father, Samuel Nalin Reeves Jr., was of Hawaiian and Chinese descent, while his mother, Patricia Taylor, was British, working in costume design. They met in Beirut when Patricia was just 19 and Samuel 21. The young couple lived fast, and Keanu's early years were far from peaceful. His name meant cool breeze over the mountains in Hawaiian, but his childhood was anything but calm. Only 3 weeks after his birth, the family moved to Sydney. A year later, Samuel vanished from their lives. Patricia tried to hold everything together, but by the time Keanu was 3, she had moved again, this time to New York, raising him alone. That move marked the beginning of years of instability. They would relocate again and again, new cities, new faces, and new stepfathers. Samuel had already fallen deep into drugs by the time he disappeared. But Keanu continued to visit him occasionally in Hawaii until he was 13. Their last meeting in 1977 was quiet and strange. They sat together under the stars, saying very little. The next morning, Samuel drove him to the airport, and that was it. Keanu never saw his father again. Years later, when asked about him, Keanu said it felt like the earth had swallowed him. When Samuel eventually landed in prison for drug charges, Keanu didn't even know. The damage from that loss was permanent. Patricia did her best to build a stable life, but her love life kept things turbulent. She married Broadway director Paul Aaron in 1970, but that marriage lasted barely a year. Then, in 1976, she married rock promoter Robert Miller, with whom she had a daughter, Karina. Later came her 4th husband, Jack Bond, a salon owner, but that ended too. In 1994, meanwhile, her work in show business exposed Keanu to a world that seemed glamorous from the outside. They lived near Nimbus 9 Studio in Toronto, a place where rock stars came and went. One night, Alice Cooper babysat him. He met Emmylou Harris and even Dolly Parton. But none of that made him feel grounded. Despite the glittering people around him, Keanu always felt like an outsider. By 17, he had attended 4 different high schools. He was expelled from one, the Toronto School for the Arts, for being too disruptive. At De La Salle College, he became a hockey goalie and earned the nickname The Wall. But reading was a constant struggle. Keanu was dyslexic, and it made school feel like an impossible maze. He said he often pretended to understand what was being taught. But deep down, he felt lost. At Avondale, his final school, he gave up. He dropped out before graduation, never earning a diploma. Acting became his escape, his only way to make sense of a world that had never made sense to him. In 1992, while Keanu's career was rising fast, his father was arrested in Hawaii for selling heroin and cocaine. He received a 10-year sentence but served only 2. Prison guards treated him kindly because of Keanu's fame, and he even earned his GED behind bars. Someone once falsely told him that Keanu had died in a crash, and Samuel broke down crying. But still, he never reached out. Keanu never spoke to him again. When Samuel died in 2018, father and son were still estranged as a teenager. Keanu was restless and impulsive, often loud and energetic. He threw himself into hockey, dreaming of going professional, maybe even making it to the Olympics. But one day, during a brutal game, he shattered his ankle so badly he could see the bone. That was the end of that dream. With nowhere else to turn, he found himself drawn to acting. Pretending, for him, became both therapy and survival. In 1984, Keanu landed his first television role in a Canadian series called Hanging In, playing a troubled teen, a role that hit close to home. That same year, he performed in a Toronto stage play called Wolf Boy. It was raw, intense, and controversial, and his performance drew attention. Critics could sense something honest in him, a vulnerability that couldn't be faked. By 1985, Keanu packed his belongings into his old car and drove across the border to Los Angeles. Agents told him his name was too strange, too foreign. They wanted him to change it to something more American, like Casey or Chuck. For a while, he tried using the name Keanu Reeves, but it didn't feel right. Eventually, he refused to hide who he was. That decision would define his career. He chose authenticity over convenience. His breakout came in 1986 with River's Edge, a grim drama about a group of teenagers coping with the murder of a friend. The story was based on a real event, and Keanu's quiet intensity stood out. Audiences saw not just a young actor, but someone who understood pain. Then came Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure in 1989. It was a goofy, light-hearted film, a total contrast to his earlier roles. Keanu had originally auditioned for Bill, but the director switched him to Ted after noticing his chemistry with Alex Winter. They improvised much of their dialogue, and what began as a small, quirky project became a cult phenomenon in 1991. Keanu pushed himself even harder for Point Break. He trained for months surfing, skydiving, even working with FBI consultants. He nearly drowned several times but refused to quit. That film, and the adrenaline that came with it, marked his transformation into an action star. A few years later, while filming Speed in 1994, he performed about 90% of his own stunts. During one take, when a bus was supposed to jump a gap on a highway, the stunt went wrong. Keanu was thrown nearly 20 feet into the air, slamming onto the ground. He cracked 2 ribs and suffered a concussion, but never told the director. He didn't want to stop filming. That's who he was, committed beyond reason. When Speed hit theaters, it made over $350 million on a $30 million budget. The success was massive. Warner Brothers offered him $75 million for a sequel, including profit shares and merchandising rights. Keanu said no without hesitation. It wasn't about the money. It never was. He wanted to work for passion, not control. He later turned down another $11 million offer for Speed 2, choosing instead to take a pay cut to work on The Devil's Advocate alongside Al Pacino. His own agent called it career suicide, but Keanu wanted the challenge, not the paycheck. His attempt at Shakespeare in Much Ado About Nothing in 1993 hadn't gone well. Critics called his performance stiff and unnatural, unaware that Keanu was battling his dyslexia. His co-star Emma Thompson had dyslexia too, and the two would stay up late rehearsing, helping each other read and understand the language. Those nights taught Keanu that vulnerability could coexist with strength. Not every project went smoothly. In Johnny Mnemonic 1995, everything that could go wrong did. What was meant to be a small, cerebral sci-fi film was turned into a big, flashy action movie. The director later called the experience torturous. The film lost nearly $100 million. But Keanu learned a crucial lesson about Hollywood's obsession with control and image. When The Devil's Advocate came out in 1997, audiences saw a new side of him. The emotional depth in his performance came from real pain, his complicated relationship with his father, his loneliness, his quiet grief. Playing opposite Al Pacino, who embodied a twisted father figure, Keanu poured his heartbreak into every line. Then came The Matrix in 1999, a film that changed cinema forever. Just weeks before filming, Keanu underwent emergency spinal surgery after years of injuries and motorcycle accidents. He could barely walk, yet he showed up to training in a neck brace, learning every movement in agony. Some of his stiffness in the film wasn't acting, it was real pain. The crew had to rearrange the shooting schedule so he could recover. But he never told the studio how bad it truly was. When The Matrix finally premiered, it became a global phenomenon. Keanu earned $10 million up front, but what he did next shocked everyone. He gave away most of his earnings, tens of millions, to the special effects and stunt teams, saying they deserved it more than he did. To him, success was never about wealth. It was about respect and gratitude. And even now, decades later, after heartbreak, surgeries, and relentless loss, Keanu Reeves continues to walk forward quietly. He has never stopped giving, never stopped feeling, never stopped caring. In a world obsessed with fame, he remains a reminder that strength isn't about how loud you are. It's about how much you can endure without losing your kindness. Studio executives thought he was out of his mind, but Keanu Reeves didn't care. He had made up his mind that the people behind the cameras, the stuntmen, the makeup artists, the designers, the ones who worked long nights without applause, deserved to be treated like the stars too. That was just who he was. After the Matrix trilogy earned an unbelievable $1.8 billion worldwide, Keanu discovered that Warner Brothers had been underreporting profits to avoid paying him his full share. It wasn't just a small accounting mistake, it was millions. In 2001, he filed a quiet but firm lawsuit, accusing the studio of using clever accounting tricks to hold back around $100 million in residuals. They settled out of court, silently. And Keanu made sure every future contract had clauses to protect him and others from being cheated the same way. But something about that experience changed him. He became more distant from Hollywood's business side. He wanted to act, not fight over money. He had never cared about fame or power. He only wanted to do the work he loved. When filming began for The Matrix Reloaded in 2002, Keanu pushed his body far beyond its limits again. The highlight of that movie was a 14-minute highway chase that became one of the most iconic action scenes ever filmed. The studio built an entire freeway just for that sequence. Keanu performed most of his own driving stunts, at times reaching speeds of more than 85 miles per hour in his Pontiac. One shot required a 180-foot car flip. He walked away from it alive, but not unhurt. The whiplash left him with long-lasting neck pain that would haunt him for years. He considered using stunt doubles in The Matrix Revolutions, but his pride wouldn't let him. He wanted to do it himself, while he was throwing himself into the physical chaos of those movies. His sister Kim was quietly fighting for her life. She had been diagnosed with leukemia back in 1991, and for a decade, Keanu stood by her side. He sold his house so he could move closer to her. He spent over $5 million on treatments and did everything he could to make her comfortable. When The Matrix made him millions, he donated more than $31 million of his earnings to cancer research. He didn't attach his name to any of it. He even created a private foundation that continued donating for years without publicity. No one knew about it until he quietly mentioned it in a 2009 interview. It was never about credit. It was about love, about keeping a promise to someone he refused to lose. Keanu Reeves endured things that would have broken almost anyone else. While filming Constantine in 2005, he insisted on looking like a real, weathered exorcist. That meant heavy makeup every day so much that the chemicals burned his skin. His face and neck became covered with painful welts and blisters. Doctors told him to stop immediately, but he didn't. He even refused to use a double for the fire scenes. Actual flames scorched his skin and made his injuries worse. Still, he continued. He smoked real cigarettes on set to stay in character, even though it slowed his healing. Filming had to pause several times so he could recover, which added $2 million to the already $100 million budget. But he never complained. He wanted the story to be real, but what hurt him the most didn't happen on a movie set. On December 24, 1999, just before the world was about to see The Matrix for the first time, Keanu's real world collapsed. He and his girlfriend, actress Jennifer Syme, were expecting their first child. They had already picked a name Ava, but on Christmas Eve, their baby girl was stillborn at 8 months. There had been no warning. Jennifer was healthy, the nursery was ready, and they had been dreaming of that future for months. When Ava was gone, the grief was unbearable. Jennifer fell into depression so deep she needed professional help. Keanu vanished from public life for nearly a year. He turned down multiple movie offers worth millions, unable to face cameras or people. Their relationship couldn't survive that pain. They loved each other deeply, but grief hollowed them out. They drifted apart, quietly, without anger, just sorrow. Then came the tragedy that ended what little healing he had found. On April 2, 2001, at about 6 in the morning, Jennifer Syme died in a car crash on Los Angeles' Cahuenga Boulevard, the same road where Keanu had filmed speeding scenes. Years earlier for Speed, she had lost control of her Jeep and slammed into parked cars. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The police found white powder and pain medication in the car from a past injury. The day before, she and Keanu had been together in San Francisco. They'd had brunch, talked about the future, and even smiled again. That was their last day. When Keanu called the coroner's office asking if Jennifer Syme was there, he already knew the answer. That was the day something inside him went quiet forever. In 2006, he starred in A Scanner Darkly, a surreal animated film about a man slowly losing his identity and sanity. For Keanu, it wasn't just a role, it was therapy. He poured his own grief and confusion into it. Some of the most haunting lines in the movie weren't in the script. He improvised them on set. The director said later those unscripted moments changed the entire story. The movie became about people trapped between worlds, not really belonging anywhere. That was Keanu living between past and present, memory and loss. Then came the day the Earth stood still in 2008. A movie that critics dismissed, calling his performance emotionless. But what they didn't know was that Keanu really did feel empty. He didn't even attend most of the press events. He played an alien disconnected from humanity because that's how he felt, alienated, alone, trying to understand a world that taken so much from him. But something changed in 2014. Keanu signed on to star in John Wick, a film that many thought would be a forgettable revenge thriller. It became something much more. At age 50, he pushed his body harder than ever before. He trained 3 months straight learning jiu-jitsu, judo, gun combat, and a new martial art called gun kata. During filming, he broke his left hand punching a stuntman, but he refused to stop. He asked the crew to glue and tape his hand together so he could keep working. The film cost only about $30 million but made $86 million worldwide. It revived his career, but Keanu didn't take credit. Even though he helped choreograph many of the action scenes, he gave the credit to others. He didn't want attention. He wanted the story to shine for John Wick. Chapter 2. He trained even harder. The famous pencil fight scene that shocked audiences took to grueling days to film. It was less than a minute long on screen, but 14 hours of real work. The pencils were metal props to make the sound authentic. Keanu dislocated his shoulder during that sequence and needed surgery, but he was back on set 3 days later. Nothing could stop him. By the time Chapter 3 Parabellum was filmed in 2019, he trained 10 hours a day for 6 months. He lost 20 pounds to keep his reflexes sharp. During a motorcycle rehearsal on the Brooklyn Bridge, he crashed and shattered his kneecap. Doctors ordered immediate surgery. Yet weeks later, he was back, wearing a $15,000 custom brace just so he could move. He even insisted on smashing tombstones for real during a cemetery fight scene. Pain was nothing new to him. At age 58, filming John Wick, Chapter 4 in Berlin. Keanu did his most dangerous stunt ever, riding a horse through the streets near the Brandenburg Gate. During one take, the horse panicked and bolted. It missed him by inches. When it was over, the spot where he had stood had hoof marks in the concrete. He suffered a concussion and bruised ribs, but climbed back on the horse that same day. They filmed that sequence 47 times. That was Keanu, relentless, fearless, quietly determined. He had always been loyal to those he loved. Back in 1991, he met River Phoenix while filming My Own Private Idaho. They weren't just co-stars, they were brothers in spirit. They researched their roles by spending time with real street workers, trying to understand their struggles. Their bond was so deep that once Keanu rode his motorcycle 1,300 miles to River's family ranch just to convince him to join the film. But on October 30th, 1993, tragedy struck. River Phoenix collapsed outside the Viper Room in Los Angeles and died from a drug overdose at just 23. Keanu was devastated. After that, he swore off hard drugs for life. It changed him forever. Years later, he found peace again with artist Alexandra Grant. They met in 2011 while collaborating on a small art book called Ode to Happiness, which featured his writing and her illustrations. Their friendship quietly deepened over the years. By 2019, they appeared together publicly, hand in hand. Keanu was 55. She was 51. They shared a love of art, literature, and motorcycles. In 2025, Keanu said she rides with him now and that she loves it. It was the first time in decades that he let someone truly into his world, behind all of his calm and kindness. Keanu carried constant pain. Back in 1999, before The Matrix was released, he had been losing feeling in his legs. Doctors found a crushed disc in his spine. He needed immediate surgery and had a metal plate placed in his neck. But even before the surgery, he continued training in martial arts. He wore a neck brace under his shirt so no one would know. He was terrified that if the studio found out, they would replace him. The pain never truly went away. Even after more surgeries in 2013, he kept moving, never complaining, never asking for sympathy. Through it all, he kept giving. When the world shut down in 2020 during the pandemic, Keanu quietly volunteered at food banks in Los Angeles, disguised so people wouldn't recognize him. He served meals and donated millions to struggling families, hospitals, and schools. His foundation kept running, helping children's hospitals and cancer research. He never attached his name to any of it. He simply said he preferred to let the work speak for itself. Even when he returned to The Matrix Resurrections in 2021, the experience wasn't easy. He was 57, still healing from surgeries, and unhappy with the constant script changes. Nearly half of Neo's lines were rewritten by Keanu himself. When the film finally released, it made $160 million against a $190 million budget. Critics were divided, but Keanu stayed gracious. He never blamed anyone. Then came something unexpected. In 2024, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 cast Keanu as the voice of Shadow, his first major voice acting role. He recorded 200 lines alone during strict safety protocols. His deep, intense voice brought the character to life, and the movie went on to earn $725 million worldwide. Even at 60, he was finding new ways to surprise the world. But the challenges didn't stop. In December 2023, 6 of Keanu's valuable watches were stolen from his Hollywood Hills home, including a $9,500 engraved Rolex he had gifted his John Wick for stunt team. It felt deeply personal. Months later, in July 2025, police in Chile recovered the watches during a raid on an international gang. Keanu even testified remotely to help bring justice. Still, the break-in left him shaken in 2025. At age 60, Keanu stepped onto Broadway for the first time. He performed 8 shows a week in Waiting for Godot, often pushing through pain from his knees and back. Critics called his performance brilliant and haunting. He said it was the hardest thing he had ever done. But as the crowds cheered, another problem followed him: AI deepfakes. Thousands of fake accounts used his image for romance scams. Some fans lost their savings, believing they were helping him. Keanu began spending $50,000 every month on cyber protection for his fans. Using a company called LOI, he'd once said that losing control of your image means losing part of yourself. And he meant it. Despite all this, he remains humble. "Try not to suck," he once said when asked for advice. That's his whole philosophy. He doesn't care about wealth. He said he could live comfortably for centuries on what he already has. In 2025, Lionsgate confirmed John Wick 5. He smiled and said he was ready. He's even open to another Bill and Ted movie. After everything: the heartbreaks, surgeries, loss, and pain, Keanu Reeves still stands tall. He trains, he rides, he works, he gives. Born in Beirut, shaped by tragedy and lifted by resilience, he has become something more than a movie star. He's a living reminder that kindness, humility, and strength can survive anything.